I love that American voice. Right, so good afternoon. Like I said, it's a very large group this afternoon, so we're going to run it more as a webinar style, which will mean it'll be less interactive as some of my sessions are. I prefer to have interactive sessions, but with a group this large, it's just not as practical. It's a lot harder to do that. I still hopefully will have some time to put you into breakout rooms, so you can have some conversations amongst yourselves, and then it's not just me talking, but there'll be less feedback. There will still be time at the end to answer any questions. I will make sure that I allow time for that. So if you do have questions, sorry, there's still more people coming in. If you do have questions, then there will be time at the end. If your question comes to you in the middle of the training, that's absolutely fine. Please just put it in the chat. The chat is at the bottom of your screen, right in the middle of the toolbar. There's a little speech bubble and it says chat. So if you have any questions as we go, put them in there, and then I'll see them at the end. Otherwise, obviously, I'll get to them at the end anyway. So my name's Carrie Calendar. Some of you will have seen me before in other training. I am the Training and Development Coordinator. I was going to say national then, and that's not right because it's Scotland and Wales as well, so we're not allowed to say national. I'm the Training and Development Coordinator for the denomination. So I'm employed by Church House to oversee all of the safeguarding training that we offer throughout the URC. I'm also, for those of you who are in Yorkshire, now the SSO for Yorkshire as well, but I'm not wearing that hat today. So today I'm here as the Training and Development Coordinator. So I'm based out of Church House technically, but I actually work from home. So I'm based in the north of England, where it's a delightful day. It's blowing a gale. I'm sure it is where you are as well. It's pretty awful today, isn't it? So yes, today's training, we're going to be looking at elders in your role as trustees for your churches as charities. So the majority of you, potentially all of you on today, will be a trustee for your charity. Some of you may not be, but it's still very worthwhile to know what the trustee's role is, because it will affect other elders, and it's just still useful for you to have that strategic oversight and understanding of what the elders as trustees do. So obviously today is a safeguarding training, so there's lots of roles for you as trustees that we won't touch on. There's other opportunities for you to get that potentially through your synod. Today we will just be looking at your role in relation to safeguarding. If you've already done this training with me, now is my opportunity also to say you may leave, because I have had people thinking that these are subsequent sessions, and they're not. They're all a repeat of the exact same training. So if you've ever done an elders training with me before, this is the same one, just as a heads up. If you've not, please stay. There's a lot of you today, so it's wonderful that there's so many here. Thank you for your time. We will be finished by 4 o'clock today, and yeah, there's going to be a lot of screen sharing, so I'm going to get straight into the screen share now. And yeah, we'll get going. Ooh, let's try. So the welcome guidelines, I've already gone through most of those. So please ensure you're on mute. Use the chat function. If you do want to make a comment or say anything during the session, I will try and get to you, but please raise your hand using the raise your hand function, and please try and make the comments as I ask for feedback. Just another heads up, you will get the slides for this training session afterwards. We send out the slides with a feedback form. The feedback form is where you get... Please, can whoever's coming just mute yourselves? Thank you. Just had some feedback then. So yeah, you will get your certificate once you complete the feedback form. Emma Pierce, who does all of our admin for safeguarding, she will send the slides and the feedback form possibly tomorrow. Depends what time she finishes work today, because like I said, we won't finish till 4. If you haven't received it by the end of tomorrow, then potentially chase up for it, but please do wait until then. you may not get it instantly. So you will get your feedback form. Once you fill in the feedback form, that generates the certificate to your inbox. If after you've completed the feedback form, you don't get a certificate, please check your junk. They have a nasty habit of going in there. If it's still not there, then again, please contact Emma. You can contact me, that's absolutely fine. But she does tend to deal with all the admin. So yeah, you will get slides afterwards. There's also a few other handouts, but the majority of the handouts for this session you should have had in the pre-read before you came today. So Emma sent everyone an email with all of that information. I do not expect you to have gone through all of those links and read it all. Please do not worry if you haven't. It's just I will be directing you to that reading as we go. So just so you've got it already, you know exactly where to find it. So why are we here today? The aims of this session, we're going to be looking at the URC safeguarding structure and how this supports your role. So like I said, we're talking about your role in safeguarding as an elder. That is a very strategic role because we obviously have other people within your church and within the synods and within the organisation who have a specific role in safeguarding. So you have lots of support, and we're going to be looking at how that all fits together today, and then looking at how that relates specifically to your role as a trustee. There are 5 safeguarding actions outlined by the government for charities, and we will look at those and look at what your role is in making sure that they are implemented in your church. So first of all, I wanted to start by thinking of this from a biblical perspective. Now, we know that safeguarding fits into the wider population, into the wider world. It's legislated for. It's not something that we just think about in church. But obviously, we are here today in that capacity. And I think it's really important to think about how safeguarding links into your role. We are very grateful that you give up your time for safeguarding training, but I really don't want it to just be a tick box exercise. I really am very passionate about safeguarding, and I want to support churches to have cultures where safeguarding is focused on so that people feel safe. And I do feel that that's part of our duty as Christians. We need to make sure that our churches are safe and that we're not ignoring any unwanted behaviour or signs of abuse. So if we take it back to the Bible, I've just put 3 verses in here, which you can see. I don't need to read them out because you can see them on your screen, and obviously you'll get the slides. But I do think it's important to think about this from a biblical perspective and think about the fact that God calls us to support the people in our churches, to stand up for those who are treated unfairly, defend the rights of the poor, the needy, the vulnerable, and be lovingly overseeing those in your care. So it is a legislative issue, but I also think it's something that should be in our hearts and ingrained in what we're doing as a church. So just thinking about where are we now and how we've got to being at this training today, and some of the legislation and the recent case review that has got us to where we are. So the URC conducted a past case review, which is mentioned on our website. It's also mentioned in foundation training. So hopefully you're aware of that. This was partly in relation to ICSA, which I will talk about next, but it was partly just to look at all of the past cases that had gone on in the URC, to look at how we could learn lessons from that and make steps forward to make sure that we don't ever repeat any of those mistakes, that we learn from lessons, that we make sure that we improve our practice in safeguarding. So there's lots of work being done in the denomination as a whole. We have a very solid central team now in safeguarding, and we are working very closely with our safeguarding officers to make sure that we, like I said, make steps forward and make sure that things that have happened in the past don't happen again. So this is all about improving our practice, making sure that we learn from lessons and make things better. We're never going to make churches a perfect space. We're just never going to do it. But we want to make things as safe as we can. So we've also responded to ICSA, which was the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse. This was again done across the country, and it took quite a long time, and they gathered information and evidence from a multitude of organisations. So as a faith organisation, we were involved in that. They spoke to us at length, and then once the report was written and produced, we responded to that, again, to make sure that we were taking what was said in that report seriously and that we were making the necessary changes in relation to their recommendations. That report is all online if you're interested, and there was lots of recommendations for lots of organisations, so we're partly responding to that. Also, we're aware, I hate putting COVID onto slides, it feels like that was a long time ago, but it's still having an impact now in terms of how people are presenting in church. The impact for safeguarding was massive. Obviously, churches closed, schools closed. When I say closed, went online, but people weren't getting the services that they used to and the face-to-face interaction. And that obviously had an impact on child abuse, on domestic abuse, lots of things we saw arising. Now that churches are back offering in-person, face-to-face interaction, I know that churches are seeing potentially a drop in their numbers. We're seeing people coming back with a whole range of different issues. So again, it's how do we respond to that in our role in safeguarding? So that's where we are now. Oh no, my slides are out of date. I haven't updated it. So as of Thursday last week, and I thought I'd gone through all my slides, as of Thursday last week, we no longer have Good Practice 5, we have Good Practice 6. I'm sure some, if not all of you, are aware of that, and some of you were probably at the symposium that we ran on Thursday. So we launched Good Practice 6 on Thursday, and that is now live on the website. As most of you will be aware, this has replaced Good Practice 5, which is our policy guidance for safeguarding. So Good Practice 6 is now up on the website. You can access it. The hard copies will be coming to you probably around mid-November by the time they get posted out. They're still at the printers, but they're supposed to be coming to Church House the first week in November. And then obviously we've got the task of packaging all those up and getting them posted. So every church will have a hard copy of Good Practice 6. I want to say they'll have that by the end of November. In the meantime, it's available online for you. And I'll make sure that in my follow-up email, you will get the link to that. The newsletter for safeguarding is also going out next week, and our newsletter will also have the link in. The newsletter comes to your church safeguarding coordinator. So if you never see the safeguarding newsletter, please speak to them and make sure that they are disseminating that information and passing it out through your church. We've been, the newsletter has been coming out all of this year. It comes out quarterly. So this is the final edition for this year. The next one will come out in 2024. We also make sure that the newsletter is up on the URC website. So if you've not seen the most recent one, go and check out the URC website because it's on there, and the new one will be there as of next week. So if you've not got the link to Good Practice 6, that will be another place to find it. I can see there's a couple of messages in chat, but I'm going to wait a couple of minutes before I read those because I'm going to give you a couple of minutes now to think about your own role when it comes to safeguarding and where you think that fits in relation to the church safeguarding coordinator and the synod safeguarding officer, because it's obviously not just your responsibility to think about safeguarding. So I'm going to take a second to read what's in the chat at the moment, and I'm going to ask you to write your own answers to this in the chat. So what do you think your role is when it comes to safeguarding? Now, there's 59 people in here at the moment, so there's no way I'm going to be able to read all of them, but it'll be just nice to see generally what you think your role is. So I'll give you a couple of minutes to write your answers in the chat, and in the meantime, I'll take a look at what's in there. Oh, thank you very much. Somebody's posted the link to Good Practice 6, so it's there for everybody. Wonderful. So you've got no excuse. Thank you, Phoebe Mann. Right, I will give you a couple of minutes now to post your own answers. Brilliant. They're all coming through. Some of the direct messages to protect others who are possibly more vulnerable. Thank you. Yep, definitely. Being aware of the issues, yep, and ready to raise them with your safeguarding coordinator. Yes. So very much linking with that person, taking it to your safeguarding officer. Yep. Ensuring that safeguarding is done the correct way. Yes, thank you. We're going to be looking at that and looking at your role and how it works strategically. Yes, very much being aware of the requirements. Reporting anything to your coordinator. Yes, definitely. Reporting incidents. Yes, making sure that you regularly review the safeguarding policy. Definitely, that is part of your responsibility. We will look at that again. Yep, ensuring the safety of your members. Yes, definitely. Supporting the coordinator. Yes, brilliant. We'll look again at how that plays out in your strategic role. Yes, definitely being aware of legislation and guidelines. That's really, really important that you have an awareness of any legislative changes. Again, if there are any changes to legislation, we will always make you aware of that in the safeguarding newsletter. So I would very much recommend that you keep abreast of what's in that. So one of the things we will talk about in this training is how you link with your church safeguarding coordinator. And one of the things that I would suggest as elders that you ask of your church safeguarding coordinator is to make sure that they bring that safeguarding newsletter to your elders meetings, that they share it with you, so that again, you are aware of any legislation and guidance or changes to make sure you've seen that. That's a really good way for them to link with you and for you to have that strategic understanding. Yeah, updating your training. Somebody who is safeguarding coordinator. Yes, brilliant. Some of you here are probably safeguarding coordinators and elders. So yeah, definitely a bit of a dual role. Being aware of the needs of people in our church family and listening to them. Yes, 100%. So a lot of what we're going to talk about today is around how as elders you support the culture of your church and how you are supporting and developing that culture as a culture that supports safeguarding issues, takes things seriously, and that is all about listening to people. A lot of people think that safeguarding is responding to disclosures or responding to concerns of abuse. But a lot of the time, you will never have a disclosure. You will never have a concern to report. It's about creating that culture in the first place where people feel safe and listened to, so that if there was a concern, they would bring it to you. So it's a lot more than just the disclosure side. In fact, I would say that that's a very small proportion of safeguarding. The majority part of safeguarding is creating that safe culture and also creating a church where we stop there being issues in the first place. So we don't talk about it in detail today, but that's around your safe recruitment. It's around how you call out, you know, worrying behaviour or low level concerns, just around keeping people as safe as possible. So thank you for those responses. They were brilliant and really helpful. It's good to see people already have an awareness of what they're meant to do. So today we're talking mainly about your role as a trustee, because each URC church is run as a charity. And I have been asked about the differences, because some churches I think aren't registered officially because of your income. But you still need, even if your income requirements don't meet the threshold to be a registered charity, you still have to fulfill all the requirements set out by the Charity Commission. And even if you're not officially registered, we still have to fall in line with that. So all charities, not just churches, have charity trustees. These are the people responsible for general management. And like I said, in the case of the vast majority of local churches, that is the elders. Now, we will have some elders in churches who will not be trustees. There are certain preclusions from that. There may be, like, bankruptcy will stop you becoming a trustee. There are other things that may stop you being a trustee, but the majority of people will be. It's automatic once you become an elder. So in that role, the Charity Commission sets out that charity trustees have primary responsibility for safeguarding, and that is set out in legislation. It's legal, it's law. This is not something that the URC are putting on you in your role as elders. It's something that has come from government. So everything we're talking about today does have a legal aspect. And in order to comply with your insurance and things like that, obviously you need to make sure you're in line with that. So, like I said, it's a legal accountability to the Charity Commission. So the Charity Commission are the governing body for all charities across England and Wales. And they have set out quite clearly what they want charities to do in terms of safeguarding. So it's set out very clearly on their website and in all of their information. And they want people to be proactive when it comes to safeguarding. So it's a key component to working as a charity. All charities need to obviously make sure they protect and keep everyone safe who works or deals with that charity. And if we're not doing that, then it's seen as a breach of our accountability to the Charity Commission. And any breaches, we do need to report to the Charity Commission. And in my role as SSO, I have been involved in that, in having to report things to the Charity Commission. I'm not saying this at all to scare you, so please do not panic. The Charity Commission obviously want to make sure that everything we do is keeping people safe and that we're in line with that. When we have had to make reports to the Charity Commission, 9 times out of 10, if not more, they see our report, see that we're responding to any concerns, that we're following that up, that we're doing what we're meant to do as a denomination, and they're quite happy with that and they leave us to it. It's obviously just making sure that there is that accountability so that they know that as charities, we're doing what we are meant to do and we know that we've reported it. So every report I've made so far, they've come back, they've said, okay, can I just get this little bit of information from you? And I've gone, yeah, here you go. And then it's been left at that. So it is just an accountability thing. Obviously, if we were in breach or we weren't safeguarding people, then we would want somebody to make sure we're doing something about that. So, like I said, if your church isn't registered due to income thresholds, then you still remain subject to general charity law. So that's just worth being mindful of if you're in a smaller church, because I have been asked that in the past. So this jigsaw, there's a link to it at the top of the slide, and this was one of the things that you got sent in your pre-read. So these are the 6 main duties that you are required to comply with in your role as trustees. Some of these are not related to safeguarding, so I'm not going to go into all of them in any detail. I just think it's very worth being aware, if you've not seen this before, of where you can find this jigsaw and having a link to it. When you click on the link, it opens each of those pieces in more detail, so you can read exactly what those elements are. There are safeguarding elements in some of them, so things like ensuring your charity is accountable is things like making sure we do the relevant reports and that we have the relevant accountability in place. Some of the things are around managing resources and finances that I don't need to talk about today. All I'm going to say about this is take a look at it and go away in your own time if you've not already, and make sure that as a trustee you are familiar with this and what is required of you, because it's really important. Right, let me just take my floor. So thinking about your church in relation to the denomination as a whole. So obviously charities across the UK are all very different. They differ in size and they differ in structure. So we're very fortunate in the URC in terms of the structure that you are not on your own as a church. You have lots and lots of support around you. Obviously, churches do operate in isolation in terms of you have your own structure within your church and your own ways of doing things, but you are supported. So if you have safeguarding concerns, please speak to your synod safeguarding advisor. I cannot stress that enough. Please do not ever deal with safeguarding concerns on your own. This is because SSOs, your safeguarding officer, have additional information that you might not have. They are very well trained and they are employed for that sole purpose to support your church. Also, in terms of being external, what we find, and I know this very much, I grew up in church and my church is my family. They are my world. If there was a safeguarding concern within that church, I would absolutely hate to have to deal with that. It would break my heart. I'm the safeguarding coordinator for my church, and I really hope that I don't ever have to deal with a safeguarding concern with somebody that I know. It would be horrible. Your safeguarding officer does not know the people in your church. They're not as personally involved. So when it comes to making referrals or knowing who to report things to, they have that detachment that you might not have. So they can support you with that. They can also make referrals or reports on your behalf, so you don't have to have made that referral for somebody that you care about. So that's another reason why we have this structure for safeguarding, because it makes it easier for synod safeguarding officers to they are more detached. And that's one of the biggest challenges for churches when it comes to safeguarding, is that you're working and dealing with your friends. This is not a workplace situation in the same as you might have in a school or social care or whatever. And we recognise that, and we recognise that that makes safeguarding hard and difficult. So please use the team around you for that support. So in practice, you should have a church safeguarding coordinator. And if you don't, please do contact your synod safeguarding officer again, because they will look at ways to support you in that. All churches need one. It's not about whether you have children in your church, or even if you think that there's adults at risk. Anybody could potentially become at risk. Children could start attending your church, or they could come as a one-off for a specific service. We need to have church safeguarding coordinators again to create that culture. Please make sure you have one. They are the people that would deal with any disclosures or concerns in terms of the operational, logistical, day-to-day dealing with it. You have a more strategic role, which we will talk about, that you do need to make sure that you're working with your church safeguarding coordinator and having oversight if there are any concerns. So like I said, if you don't have one, please do speak to your SSO. So your main role, like I've already said, is around strategy and culture. We've already touched on how you can support and develop the culture in your church, and we're going to go into that in a bit more detail in a couple of moments. In terms of your strategic role, like I've already mentioned, it's about that accountability and that oversight. So if there is a concern in your church, then your church safeguarding coordinator needs to make the eldership aware that there is a concern. However, they do not need to disclose confidential information in relation to that concern. There's some things that you do not need to know, and there's some things that you do. If there are things that you need to know, your church safeguarding coordinator will be liaising with your synod safeguarding officer, and they will let you know anything that you need to know. But from a strategic point of view, you would just need to have an awareness that we've had a safeguarding concern, it's being dealt with, potentially X, Y, Z have been informed, we've had to do this referral, blah, 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 blah. It's often bare minimum of information, but it's for you to have that awareness so that you can hold your church safeguarding coordinator accountable and just check, you know, okay, we've had a safeguarding concern. Have you let the SSO know so they can let you know what they've done about it? Have you made the relevant referrals? Have you done, you know, have you documented it correctly? Blah, 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 blah. It's very much that accountability. So again, we will talk towards the end about how you do that in practice. One of the suggestions that I make is that your church safeguarding coordinator should be writing reports to your elders meetings. If there's nothing to report, great. They don't need to write stuff for the sake of it, but they need to tell you that there's nothing to report, because that in itself is information so that you know, well, we've had nothing because there is nothing, not just because someone hasn't let us know. If you have safeguarding as a standing agenda item for your elders meetings, you will always be kept in the loop. It could be, and it most likely will be, yep, we've had no safeguarding concerns, tick, we move on. But at least it's giving people the opportunity to raise things if there is a concern, to mention anything, or mention anything that may be happening in terms of practice or around policies, or around things like the newsletter, training, are people up to date? Again, it shouldn't just fall to your safeguarding coordinator to make sure that everyone's training is up to date. Yes, that is their role, but in terms of accountability, as elders, you need to be supporting your church safeguarding coordinator to make sure that training's up to date. If it's not, have they contacted the SSO? Have we requested training? Do you know when training's happening? All those sort of questions. It's just liaising and keeping in line with your church safeguarding coordinator. So in terms of culture, I'm now going to put you in some breakout rooms so that you can have a chat with one another. It may be that you want to share some good practice around the things that you're doing to support a culture of safeguarding in your church. It may be that you just get some information from one another. So this is an opportunity now to share with each other. If you've got any brilliant good practice, then there will be opportunity to share afterwards. I'm not going to go to every single breakout room and ask everyone's feedback because we don't have time when there's so many of you. But if you've got something really useful to share, then please do. So I will just ask for people to raise their hands when we come back to the group to share with one another. If you want to nominate someone in your breakout room to do that feedback, again, that might be helpful in terms of time. Please do that. If they don't get to the feedback, then that's fine. But as long as we know who's doing it. It may be that if we don't get a chance, I will ask you to write things in the chat. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen now, and I'm going to create lots and lots of breakout rooms. So I've done 11 breakout rooms, so there'll be 5 to 6 of you in each room. So hopefully that's a nice number to share with one another. I'm going to give you 8 minutes in this breakout room. Hopefully that's long enough. It never is long enough, but it's all the time we have. So please do have some good conversations and then come back and we'll take some feedback. Thank you.
Better. 6, thank you. supposed to be joining room 2, but I don't know you join room 2. This is, all this is exactly what I read this morning. Every bit of it. Join room 2. Well, I pressed join and nothing happened.
No, but yeah, we don't make any hard and fast rules about it.
we're supposed to be doing a discussion, you see, so. Although there's nothing to discuss really, because we've done it all before.
Room 2, room 2 on.
Don't worry.
Recording in progress.
Just wait. Just waiting for everybody to come back now. It'll take just under a minute and we'll come back. Yeah, 10 seconds. The breakout rooms will close in, so everyone will start suddenly appearing. Please, can I just ask everyone to mute themselves again unless you're going to feedback? Just because otherwise I get lots of feedback on the screen. Which I'm getting now. Thank you.
I've lost my picture.
Oh, I don't know why.
Oh, so I
can
can't mute
I can
myself
see
because
you.
I can't see anything.
It'll be up in the top right hand corner. It'll say view, and then
No, I haven't got a top right hand corner. All I've got is a page saying Zoom.
oh,
Oh,
Strange.
never had that before.
I have no idea. Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go. Well, I tapped on not my picture, but the black bit next to it, and it came up with a menu, so I can mute myself now.
I can't. I may have to log out
I can mute you. That's not a problem.
but I can't see anybody, and I can't see anything on the screen. So,
Okay, if you want to leave and come back, that's fine.
yeah, if that's okay.
Absolutely fine. Right. Does anyone have any feedback from that discussion that you would like to share? If you can raise your virtual hand as opposed to your real one, it will make it easier because I have 3 screens of people, so I can't see everyone. So if you do want to feedback, if you raise your hand, which is in reactions, if you go down to reactions at the bottom. So, Jode James, do you want to unmute?
Hello.
Do you have some feedback?
Hi, Carrie. Yes, thank you. It's Jodie. Hi.
Yeah,
just quickly, really rounding up what everybody was talking about is the sort of the difference in sometimes thinking that we should well, not should, but sometimes that we leave it to the safeguarding officer and feel it's totally their responsibility. Not meaning to be like that, but it tends to be just left to the safeguarding officer. Some people don't really believe in supporting necessarily the safeguarding aspect of it and think possibly that we don't need to bother. So there's some sort of encouragement that's needed there to bring that in, and talked about sort of having it as an agenda item like you suggested on the meetings. David talked about a specific had some African people come along, 5 or 6 families have come in. So he's sort of thinking now that maybe he needs to think about having a representative and talking about their culture and what's important for them. So that was quite good.
Yeah.
Some people thinking like it could be bureaucracy within the leadership or the church, and trying to encourage that away from just that. Or that people are checking up on us, and do we have to interview everybody for the roles when it's just a sort of jump in and help sometimes. It is rare, but we shouldn't be complacent about it. And just thinking also that it's not always just about children. We've also sometimes got older people in the congregation that end up being looked after by people, and considering, you know, who's going out to look after them, who's at risk, who's not, if somebody fell down the stairs. So lots of discussions around sort of things we might need to think about on safeguarding.
Yeah, that's really helpful. And one of the things that I always like to say in my safeguarding training, so obviously safeguarding is my job, but I would put my faith and my Christianity way before my job. Don't tell the URC that. I don't think they might. And when I go to church on a Sunday, I don't go in with wearing a safeguarding hat, even though I'm a safeguarding coordinator. I don't go in thinking, oh, there may be a safeguarding concern. We get that church is way bigger than safeguarding. This isn't your bread and butter. It's not why you go to church. So I do completely understand why some people think it's not relevant in churches and it's not something that we should be thinking about, and, you know, oh, well, we'll never get a concern here. The fact is that you could get a concern, you could have a disclosure. It's not just around child abuse, or it's things like, I think, considering domestic abuse, or as like you mentioned, older adults who may go into care and may need some support, and there may be safeguarding issues. There's so many different elements to it, and church should be that safe space where if there was a concern, that people could come to church and say, this is happening and I need some help. So it's just around creating that environment and trying to help create that. So it's relevant for everybody, even if you don't have children. Even, like I said, if you don't ever have a concern, let's pray that we don't. But in the meantime, let's create a space where if there was something, that people could come and speak about it. Because when you look at the statistics of things like domestic abuse, it's harrowing. It's more people than you would ever think about. The same with all sorts of different abuse, financial abuse. There's so many scams out there now. It's scary. It's a scary world. And again, it's not about bureaucracy. It's not about trying to scare you or put restrictions on you. It's so that you're not in situations where something's gone wrong and everyone's going, oh, if only we'd have done this, if only we'd have had a bit of safe recruitment. Or, you know, we do have to recognise that churches are very open and we have open doors, and anybody could walk into your church at any time. And we need to keep it as safe as possible. Elspeth, you've got your hand up.
I was just going to say, I was sharing with my group about the fact that we, as you say, can't be complacent, because it's the most unexpected people who might well be perpetrators of abuse. And I did have a situation many years ago in a church where I realised that somebody who used to come down and visit and to sing in the choir regularly was trying to groom me and my family. But sad, he had been in prison. He was a paedophile, and I was told that I was being unchristian in voicing my concerns. And I think we have to be very careful to get that balance right.
Yeah, I completely agree, and that's why we have safeguarding training offered to you as in a church setting, because there's different layers within a faith organisation that you don't get in other parts of the secular world, because there is this idea of, you know, forgiveness and loving everybody and being open. And we're not saying don't be like that. We're saying please be aware of what could happen. And if it does happen, it's not unchristian to raise concerns. It's not unchristian to put safeguarding measures in to keep people safe and to do risk assessments and have people who are offenders on contracts and things like that, because it's keeping people safe. And that's a loving, caring thing to do for everyone else in your church. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that brings it to life, that it can happen, it does happen. And there's been a massive case in the Church of England. The report was produced a couple of weeks ago. It's the guy Mike, and I cannot pronounce his surname. I need to get it so that I can pronounce it in training. But he created Soul Survivor. He was the leader of Soul Survivor, which is a massive thing nationwide. I know umpteen teenagers who's gone sole survivor. It's a massive thing in the Church of England, and he's just been convicted of umpteen crimes and will potentially be put on the will be stopped from working with children for good. So that's just happened. It's just come to light in the Church of England. And again, the least likely person that you would have expected that to have happened. He's a well-respected leader. He's charismatic. He's charming. He's dedicated his life to the church. It's not the person you would have expected. So we can't be complacent. So thank you again for sharing that with us. Anybody else want to share? Elspeth, are you okay just to mute again?
Oh, sorry, yes.
Sorry. I think the problem is when people aren't muted, they end up becoming centre screen. I don't know if everyone else has got. There we go. I've spotlighted myself and then you can see me. Right, so we're going to go back to the screen and move on. So thank you. If you've got anything else that you think would be really helpful for the people, then please put it in the chat and then people can see that. You can share. So culture within the church is about making sure people feel listened to and that they feel safe to report concerns. And again, a lot of people think, oh, why am I doing another safeguarding training? We know that there's been cases where safeguarding has been ignored in churches and people therefore don't feel safe because they think if I do report it, no one's going to do anything anyway. People are just going to close in on themselves. They're going to support the leadership. They're not going to take me seriously. And we need to try and move away from that as much as we can. So again, that culture is supporting training, making sure that it's happening, that people have training. Because again, the more training that we have, it's not just a tick box exercise. This is a response to, like I said, to ICSA, to the past case review. And training encourages conversation. It encourages people to talk about these things. And that may just spur somebody to share something or to call out unhealthy behaviour. So it is important to make sure that training's done. And making sure, again, that your policies aren't just a tick box exercise. Policies aren't there so that we can say, yep, done that, put it on the shelf, no one's ever going to read it. And I will acknowledge it in my professional life. I have seen that in numerous organisations. Oh, safeguarding policies come around again. Yep, I've read it. I'll sign my name, tick, tick. I've done it. I know that that's how people feel, but we want policies to be working documents that people actually follow. If there's a concern, that they actually know what's in there and they know what to do. Safeguarding policies shouldn't be onerous. They're usually quite simple. It's please report to this to the church safeguarding coordinator. Please report this to your synod safeguarding officer. It's not a lot of information that people need to know about. But obviously ensuring as a leader that you're promoting that this is important, that you are making sure, again, like I said, that people are trained and that they're following that. Again, this isn't something that I'm going to go into in detail because you've had this in your pre-read. So if you've not read it, please take some time to go back. But one of the reasons why we do this training is because there are actions that trustee boards need to take to ensure good safeguarding governance. And this, again, has been stipulated by the Charity Commission. I don't need to read this slide. You're all capable of reading that in your own time. But please do take some time to have a look at that and make sure that you are following what the Charity Commission asks of us in terms of ensuring good safeguarding governance. So in line with that, the UK government makes sure that all charities undertake these 5 actions. So we're going to look at these 5 actions in practice. So what does it mean? So having suitable policies and practices in place, quite self-explanatory, but there is a bit more detail to go into. Carrying out necessary checks, protecting your volunteers and staff, identifying and managing risk, and handling and reporting incidents appropriately. So all of those things are your responsibility. In terms of policy, we ask that that's reviewed annually. And again, we've talked about policies. It's just a case of thinking about, do the relevant people in your church know where to find yours? Is it up to date? Has it got the right people's names on it, the right people's contact details? It's very quick and easy to review a safeguarding policy. There's very little that needs to be changed, but you do need to review it just in case. It may be that your church safeguarding coordinators change, or your SSO, or their emails changed, or their phone numbers changed. Please make sure that those policies are up to date and it's the correct information. Also, think about other policies that you may need or want to have, again, to protect people. So all of these are thinking in line with safeguarding. Things like internet use and social media. Obviously now, if you have children in your church, they will all be using social media. I mean, I say all, there might be the odd exception, but I would say the majority of them are using social media, as will your young people, your young adults, also your older adults. But please make sure that you've got policies around engagement with children under 18, using social media, and check with your synod because they'll have policies that you can use. Again, there's lots and lots more information coming out around how children are being targeted and groomed online, and the statistics are just harrowing. So please be mindful of supporting your young people and your children's and youth when it comes to internet use. So again, this is not something that we're going to talk about now, but just think about an action to follow up after the training. How are you, or how would you ensure that your policy is being followed up? And how do you make sure that everyone's read it and knows where to access it? Is it that annually you go around and you circulate it and get people to sign off? Is it that it's part of their induction if they are volunteering for you? Again, when it comes to safe recruitment, again, I very much understand that churches, when it comes to volunteering, you take what you can get. You don't often have a wide pool of people volunteering. It's again not trying to add bureaucracy and trying to make it harder to get volunteers. But if you do have volunteers, you do need to make sure that they're safe. And sometimes that's just around having had a conversation with them around safeguarding. Have they seen the safeguarding policy? Do they know who to report to? Have they done their foundation training? It's often that simple, but just making sure that people have had some level of conversation or check or basic what's the word, probation period. And when I say probation, it's around, again, making sure that people know what they're doing. Have they had in that time, have they done their foundation training? Do they know who to go to? It's not around keeping checks on people. It's just putting those, if you have clear policies and guidance in place for what that you follow, it will always be followed. So as soon as you have a new volunteer, you can just have a tick box. Oh, can someone mute, because I'm getting feedback of my own voice. You will have, we've got a new volunteer, right, we're checking, have they done their safeguarding training, have they had the policy, tick, tick, tick. It's quite an easy thing. Again, safe recruitment, we don't go into that in detail today, but if you are recruiting people for whatever role that is, you do need to make sure you've looked at Good Practice 6. Again, need to update my slide. You need to refer to Good Practice 6. You do need to check that you are implementing safe recruitment. And again, we recognise that safe recruitment is different in churches when it comes to volunteers. It's not about bureaucracy. It's just making sure that everybody is the right person and that they're safe. We do offer specific safe recruitment training, which you can book onto via me. Also, it's built on in the intermediate training. Sorry. And again, when it comes to selecting any further elders, you need to make sure that you follow the safer election of elders. Again, that's on the URC website around how that's done. So hopefully you're all familiar with that, but it involves, a nomination process. And again, making sure people have had their DBS, they've had their safeguarding training. There's also an Exploring Eldership course on the Learning Hub, which is very useful for elders, which again may form part of their induction in terms of preparing them for that. Okay, so in terms of the notifications that you might need to make and referrals and reporting, if you have got volunteers or paid staff within your church, if you had to terminate that role for any reason that's linked to them working with children or adults at risk, then you do need to let DDC know. Also, if you're terminating people's contracts because, you know, there's been gross misconduct or something, it's possible that we might need to make a referral to the Charity Commission because it's regarded as a critical incident. These are things that your Synod Safeguarding Officer would support you with. Also the moderator, if it's to do with terminating people's roles, if there's been any sort of allegation, any gross misconduct, then the moderator and the SSO would support you in that, in terms of who you need to make aware, and how you follow that up. So if there is any allegations in your church, if there's an allegation made against somebody in a position of leadership or somebody who works for the church, then again, we need to protect the people that are making those allegations, because it's a very scary thing to have to make any sort of allegation or speak up against anyone within the church and call out behaviour or gross misconduct or abuse. So we do need to make sure that people are protected if they do report a concern. And we do now have a whistleblowing policy, which again, you can find on the URC website. And that is just about making sure those people are protected. But again, the majority of that comes down to your culture, and it comes down to how do we respond to people if they do report a concern. Are people going to feel that they'll be, you know, ostracized from the church? And that does happen, and I've seen it in past cases where people have reported abuse or some form of concern, and it's led to them leaving the church ultimately because other people have closed ranks around the people they've reported. I've seen in my own personal life churches split over allegations, and it's horrible. It's not a nice thing for anyone to have to go through. So we do need to, again, support that culture, and that's for you to go away and think about that. So the other thing that the Charity Commission asked is that you are identifying if there are any risks within your church and managing those risks. Now, again, we look at this in more detail in advanced training when it comes to risk management of offenders or anyone in your congregation who could pose a risk to children or adults. If there is somebody who poses a risk, we do a risk assessment, and potentially that person may be put on an agreement where there are stipulations around where they can go, what home groups they can go to, who they can sit next to, and things like that. But part of your role as an eldership is that if you become aware of a risk or that somebody is potentially posing a risk, that again, you speak to your church safeguarding coordinator and or your SSO to make sure that that risk assessment's done. Again, a lot of the feedback that I get from churches, which I get, is that, oh, but they're lovely now and they've repented and, you know, they've done their time and we just want to welcome them in. Yes, you do. We don't dispute forgiveness. That is not what we're here to do. But we can still acknowledge that people can still be a risk and that we want to manage that. So it's not for us to put aspersions on someone's faith or their relationship with God. That's not what this is about. It's about saying, again, sorry, can I ask whoever's not muted to mute yourself? Again, it's just around making sure that we keep everybody else safe. And we do have people in different churches on agreements. And most people, if they are genuinely repentant, are very compliant with that and quite happy that, yes, this is about making sure everyone else is safe. So if you are aware of any risks, it's not just around people who've been convicted of an offence. And obviously, when it comes to offenders, you may have people in your church that are offenders and you never know. And again, there's very little we can do about that. We can only minimise risk when we're aware of it. So like I said, we do carry out risk assessments. And some people within the eldership team will be involved in those risk assessments. Some people won't. Again, it depends on whether you need to know. But with all of the contracts that we have in place across the URC, and sorry, I use the terms contract and agreement sort of interchange. They used to be called contracts, and a lot of churches have moved to call them agreements. It doesn't really matter what terminology you use, but just so you're aware. Where all the contracts and agreements that we do have in place, there are elders who sit on those panels and in that meeting to discuss and to review that and to oversee those people. So again, it's just for your awareness that that you may be involved in that. Hopefully you never are. But please do inform your church safeguarding coordinator if you are aware of someone who's committed an offence, or if someone's charged with an offence who already attends your church. If we've got concerns about volunteers or paid staff, then we do need to report to the LADO, the local authority designated officer. And again, in terms of your strategic role, it may not be you that makes that referral, but you just need to have an awareness of what referrals may need to be made so that there's accountability. Because if you don't know who to report to, then you don't know if and when it's being done. So again, this is just for your awareness. You may not ever be involved in that. The same with reporting to the Charity Commission. It's usually the duty of the trustees to make that report. However, you can devolve that responsibility to somebody else. So a lot of the time you may ask your SSO to actually fill in and make that report. It's very simple to do. You do it online and you fill in a form. It's quite straightforward. But I have had churches in the past where they felt that they would rather it was the SSO who did that, again, just because of relationships and friendships and all the rest of it. But if your SSO does report anything to the Charity Commission, they will need to know that at least some of the trustees are aware of that. We can't report on your behalf without your awareness. Again, it may not be that all the trustees know. It depends on the issue. If it directly impacts on people's confidentiality and things, then it may be that only certain people are aware. But again, if there are cases and concerns, we take them individually, and it will be for your SSO and your church safeguarding coordinator to discuss who needs to know. So in terms of what to report, so like I said, safeguarding incidents are stipulated by the Charity Commission as a reportable incident. There are also other things that would need to be reported to the Charity Commission that don't fall under safeguarding, breaches of policy, if there's financial irregularity, those sort of things. Again, that would be in conversation with your moderator. We're just here to talk about safeguarding. But anything that is linking to significant harm to beneficiaries, anyone that comes into contact with the charity, incidents of abuse. One of the things that I always get asked about when it comes to people that are linked to your charity is when you've hired the building out. Because obviously, if you've hired the building out, those are people who are come into contact with your charity, but they often will have their own policies and their own safeguarding. If you are hiring the building out, make sure that people have completed the hires agreement and that you know whether they are following your safeguarding policies or their own. If there's a concern that happens within a set organisation like Scouts, for example, they make their own referrals, they make their own reporting incidents. If it's a local aerobics class that hire out the hall and there's a massive incident, it may be that you have more involvement in that. Again, individual cases, it's about speaking to your synod safeguarding officer and just getting some advice on what you would need to report. Please, if there's ever any incident, get their guidance. Right, at that point, I'm going to give you all a 5-minute comfort break, because when we come back, We're going to look at some other elements of safeguarding in relation to eldership and pastoral stuff that is less linked to the trustee role. So it's a good time to have a little break. I need to get some water. I feel like I've eaten sandpaper. So we will come back at 3:22. Okay, so if I can ask you all to be back by 3:22, that'd be great. Thank you.
This
Right.
meeting is being recorded.
I just got all of that back through your screen. Right, I think everybody's muted. Right, there are a couple of questions in. Still, some people not muted. There we go. I'm just scrolling across and seeing if I can mute. Yeah, I think that's okay now. There are a couple of questions in the chat which I'm going to answer at the end. I've seen them and I do have your answers for you. But I've got a case study now to share with you, which I think let's just spend some time having a look at this. Again, it's very difficult in such a large group, but I am going to just put you back into breakout rooms because I can hear myself on the screen. Going to work out who's not muted. So I'm just scrolling all of that and seeing. Maybe I've been muted now. Brilliant. Right, I'm going to share this. Yeah, somebody else has said we're getting a lot of feedback. Let's mute everyone. There we go. Mute. Right, I think that's everyone muted now. Thank you. Right, so I'm going to share my screen and show you a case study, and then I'm going to just send you back into breakout rooms for 5 minutes. I know that that's not long, and I appreciate that, but I do feel like the best thing with case studies is to have the discussions, otherwise that you don't get the same from it. So I'm going to share the screen now. Oh. Helpful if I hadn't already the answers. Right, so Adrian is a new youth leader in a local church. He's attended the church for several years and is well known to most of the members and their families. He's particularly good friends with one of the families whose 11-year-old daughter attends the youth group. They spend a lot of time together and have even gone on holiday together. He lives near the family and suggests that he can take her to the youth group to save them a drive each week. This will mean he's alone in the car with the girl for a 13-minute drive each way. So what I want you to discuss is obviously, should he be doing it? What are the risks involved? And what safety measures could you put in place? Would you feel differently if it was a female leader? The reason why I share this case study is because I know that this is the reality of churches, of friendships, and this isn't a disclosure. Adrian may be perfectly safe, but this is about how we create that culture and make sure that we don't allow behaviour that could slip into dangerous behaviour. And again, it's around thinking about reality and not just around bureaucracy of you should do this, you shouldn't do that. It's around, in reality, how do we create safe spaces without breaking those relationships? And we want to support friendships. We want to support healthy relationships in churches where people love one another and care for one another and support one another, but we also want to make that safe. So it's just for you to spend 5 minutes now having a conversation around the reality of that and what kind of things you can be doing to create healthy, safe relationships whilst also keeping people safe. So think about this scenario. But yeah, that's just a starting point to have a bit of a discussion. So I'm going to put you back into the breakout rooms. I'm aware that some of you, and I should have said this before, are in a group in your own, wherever you're sitting. There's like 6 of you in a room with one computer. That's fine. You don't need to go to a breakout room, just discuss amongst yourselves.
We're in here. Please wait to be assigned.
Oh, thank you for. Sorry, I didn't realise some of you were unassigned.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise. That's me. I should have. I think it's because you may have joined after I'd already assigned.
Well, we suddenly had a blank screen. Sorry.
No, don't apologise at all. I'm gonna send you to a room.
In disgrace.
Off you go. Not at all. Not at all.
Thanks, Carrie.
No problem. For those of you who aren't in breakout rooms and are just in your main rooms, I've closed the breakout rooms so people will be coming back in the next minute. So you've got about a minute to finish your conversations. hopefully everyone is back now. Right, again, do we have any feedback around that scenario and around what we think of that, and yeah, keeping people safe?
Like more room.
You manage? Do you want me to put over there?
No, this for you, Alfred.
I'm fine, I'm fine.
It's not even equivalent to us.
Sorry, if you're not, I don't know if that's because you want to feedback or if you're just unmuted. If I can ask you all to mute yourselves again when you and then unmute, or just raise your hand if you want to feedback.
See the speaker.
Okay.
Oh.
We should be muted now.
Anyone have any feedback? Patricia. Patricia, you are muted. Sorry.
Right, okay. My group thought that while it was a shame, it wasn't very appropriate for him to drive a young girl, as much for his sake as for the child. So it's not just safeguarding the child, it's safeguarding him as well.
100%. Yeah, and that's what we've got to be aware of, that anything that we do is open scrutiny and unfortunately open to allegations, and it is very much about keeping yourself safe as well as keeping other people safe. So yeah, Samantha, did you have anything to add?
Yeah, I've been in a situation where I was asked to give a child a lift, and it was a friend's kid. So he's been in the car with me loads of times, on his own, with my little lads, all sorts. But in respect to a professional capacity, I had to let them know that there would be another, make sure there was another adult in the car with me. The person sat in the back, so there could be no accidental touching. And told them how long the journey was going to be and let them know when we got there, and sent a location link. So I think you've got to be very careful, because you, like you said, you're not just protecting the child, you're protecting yourself as well.
Yeah, 100%. And all of those things that you said there are really, really wise. So things like, if you do have to give somebody a lift, because it does happen, and again, we're not saying don't, leave somebody stranded and leave a child with no way to get home. But if you are in that position, it's about accountability. It's making sure that there's transparency, so people know that you've done that. You've reported it to somebody, that somebody else in leadership knows that that's happened, that the parents know that you know exactly how long, like you said, that journey is going to take, exactly when it's happening. So it's very much about transparency. And in everything we do, if there are instances where you need to do something that is potentially could open yourself up, be as transparent as possible. Put another adult in the car, put another child in the car, make that situation, remove as much risk as you can to everybody, whilst also, like I said, recognizing that situations happen. And I know one of the reasons why I put this scenario in is because it's happened in our church countless times, of people giving lifts and like children needing, because the parent can come and pick them up, or and people being friendly and obviously trying to help one another. And it's trying to make sure that within that you just think about it and have those conversations, amongst your children's and youth and your elders, and make sure that everybody is on the same page. Because as soon as we allow anything that's slightly concerning in terms of behavior, that becomes your culture. Your culture is where these things are allowed to happen, and things go unchecked and there's no accountability. So it's just around that. Barbara.
Yes, the same for a female leader. And also, it's a sad situation because you're running a youth group, but you're destroying a possible relationship of learning to live with other human beings, whether they're male or female. And I can see what you're getting at, but I am distressed at the attitude that we're making a person guilty without any indication. And maybe we need to look at ways of getting around this. And perhaps he offers 2 people, but then a couple can offer lifts and be working together, and you can end up with a scenario. So it's a minefield.
It is a minefield, and this is the thing, and I'm not trying to cast aspersions of guilt on anybody at all. We know that 99.9% of the time, or whatever the statistic is, but the majority of the time, people who work with young people and adults at risk know how to behave. They're not trying to do anything dodgy. They're not, you know, most people, but we also have to recognise that we don't want there to be situations where people are put at risk. And it's judgment. It's about what do we feel comfortable with, and if there's behaviour that we feel uncomfortable with, calling it out. Like I said, it's that transparency. If somebody is doing everything just because they want to be helpful and kind and they've got very good intentions, they will be transparent. They will make sure that people are aware of what's happening. They will, you know, follow procedures. Again, I spoke to somebody recently who was talking about welcoming someone into their house because a youth had come over at whatever time it was to speak to them. They were a youth leader, and they let them into the house. But when they let them in, they said, hold on a sec, I just need to make sure that someone else knows you're here. So that, again, they weren't turning around and cutting down that relationship. They weren't putting barriers in place to building healthy relationships, but they were making sure that it was transparent and that other people were aware that that youth was in their house and for how long and what they were there for, again, without disclosing confidential information. It is just about transparency. It's not about making people feel that we're assuming guilt. Not at all. But like other people have pointed out, it's also keeping you safe. And it is sad. It's a very sad situation. I would love to not have to work in safeguarding. It's not, you know, it's not nice that this is the world we live in, but it is the world we live in, and we have to be aware that churches are not exempt from that, that we have situations in churches as well as we do anywhere else in the world. And it's just around keeping people safe. And I'll reiterate, most people know how to do that. So most people are not trying to do anything untoward, but we just have to make sure that if there is somebody, we don't allow them opportunities to do that. Sue, you've got your hand raised.
Yeah, I was just going to say that within that scenario that we've just looked at, I think it's really important for the individual concerned to establish very clear boundaries between his role as a youth worker in a professional capacity and his role as a friend to the family, and to set that out at the very beginning so there isn't any confusion or any offence and upset. He should be very clear to the family, look, you know, this is what I can do and this is what is not good to do because of my professionalism.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Thank you for that. And that actually segues really nicely into my next slide. So could not have been a more apt time. Thank you. I'm going to go back to the slides now. And yeah, we'll touch on some of those points. So like I said, churches are built on community and friendships. We're not trying to take away from that. That's never my intention with safeguarding. I do this role because, first and foremost, because I love God and I want to work for the church, but because also I recognise risks, and because I've seen dangerous situations and I've seen the result, unfortunately, of children that have been abused, and that's been my career. So I do this because I'm passionate about keeping people safe and stopping those situations. It's not because I want to come in and be, you know, imposing boundaries. That's not my intention at all. We don't have all the answers. We don't have to have all the answers. It's around having those conversations and thinking about it, because the more we think about it, the more it's out in the open, the less chance you will have of somebody coming along and grooming or whatever, because people are aware. So somebody has just touched on boundaries, which was brilliant. this is just a little opportunity. We've got a very short amount of time now, but a small window just to have a think about boundaries, because it's a big issue within churches because of these dual relationships and professional relationships becoming blurred, because your church and your family and youth leader or your children's leader is also somebody's best friend whose child is in there. It happens. It's like that in my church. I get it. And it's being aware of what role you're working in. If you take on the role in a professional capacity within a church, you have a duty to maintain boundaries. And that goes the same for elders, because you are viewed in a different role. As soon as you become an elder, you are seen, as my daughter's just walked in with some Lovely. You are seen in a different role as soon as you become an elder. Yes, you are still friends with people, but you are seen with you have that role and that role of responsibility. So when it comes to pastoral visiting and supporting people in that role, there are potential areas for concern. There's opportunities for there to become safeguarding issues. Again, we're not going to go into that in detail today. It's just for you to think about when you're thinking about elders and pastoral visitors, any potential concerns and how we minimize that to keep people as safe as possible. We are not making the aspersion that people are going into people's homes to abuse them, or that somebody will make an allegation against you, but we do want to make sure that we minimize risk. There may also be instances where pastoral visitors are the key people that may notice a concern or have something disclosed to them, and it's about being very clear for those people on what they do in that situation. So please make sure that with your pastoral visiting and your pastoral visitors that you have clear guidelines for working, that people are aware of the code of conduct and that they follow that. And please work together as a team. We do know that people need to work on their own and we need to think about lone working, but we don't want to create situations where there's unhealthy dependency and people are reliant on one another and aren't recognizing that actually God can use lots of you, not just one person. So we do want to make sure that we create safe cultures where there are boundaries. And again, it's just having a conversation. Think about what boundaries do we want to be in place? What boundaries do we not want to be overstepped so that we protect everyone in our church? So when it comes to boundaries and pastoral support, and when we're thinking about boundaries, it's about thinking about if situations are concerning you. And again, that's all around culture and challenging any situations that are of concern. Again, you will get these slides. I don't want to read slides out, but it's take this away and act on it. Training for me is not just about the 2 hours that you're with me. It's about what do you do when you finish this training? Are you going to go away to your eldership team and make some positive changes to support safeguarding in your church? Again, thinking around boundaries in pastoral support, think about the questions that you might be asking of people who are doing pastoral visiting, again, just to protect them and safeguard them. Obviously, again, this isn't a supporting survivors training session, but I do think it's worth touching on, because in your role as elders, we mainly talked today about your role as trustees as elders, but I do think it's really important to touch on the fact that as an elder, potentially you are going to be supporting survivors, and you might not know that you're supporting a survivor, because there are lots of people out there who are survivors of abuse who will never disclose that. But again, it's how do we create that culture where they feel that this is something that your church would take seriously. Again, it's just being treating people with compassion, giving people time and listening, I'm really thinking about this crucial concept around forgiveness and healing and supporting people, because that's a very long journey. It's not a quick fix. Again, just bringing you back to, if there was an issue where somebody has been, if someone within the congregation has been alleged to be a perpetrator, then we need to think about how we support individuals in your church, how we support people who have been subject to allegations. It's a minefield, and 10 to 4, we don't have time to unpick that. But this hopefully will just get you thinking in your church around how you can address some of these issues, and go away and discuss with the rest of your eldership around, are you creating this safe culture where you've considered these things and you would know what to do in these situations. With all things, and again, this is coming back to this idea of culture, it's creating a culture in your church where we're compassionate, and we are compassionate to people who disclose or to people who may be suffering. It should go without saying, but it doesn't always, because other views may contradict that. So it's just how do we make sure that we're compassionate and we listen to what people are really saying and what they really need. Be open, be understanding, and in all the things that we're dealing with safeguarding, I will take you back to the 4 R's, which are our fundamentals and our building blocks. If you recognise that there's a concern in any way, then respond appropriately, and please record it and report it. Don't be keeping things to yourself. Even if you're not sure, even if it's a low-level concern, even if you're not sure if it's safeguarding, please pass that on. I think these slides are slightly in the wrong order. I'm not sure why the lone working slide is there. But anyway, this idea of lone working obviously goes back to the case study that we were talking about, and being alone with potentially children, adults at risk, in lots of different situations. And again, it's just having that conversation and this discussion around how you conduct lone working. Is it necessary? Is it wise? If it is necessary, is it transparent? Is it being done out in the open? Do people know that it's happening and there's been records of that and information passed to the relevant people? We just want to keep people as safe as possible. So like I said, making sure things are planned in advance, recorded, and people notified. Yeah, I'm in the middle of work. Thank you. Okay, so your recap and your next steps. I'm really glad this is the one I chose to record. My child running in, I'll have to blur her out. So it's making sure you have an understanding that you have overall responsibility for safeguarding. All churches need to be mindful of that. It's for adults as well as children. You need to work alongside your church safeguarding officer and your synod safeguarding officer. Can you just bear with me one sec? Sorry. Sorry, I'll be done in 2 minutes. I'm so sorry. Okay, please can you ensure that concerns are responded to, recorded and referred on, and ensure policies are in place and reviewed annually. So practically, how do you ensure your responsibility is met? So I've talked about this all the way through, but this is just a summary of those practical steps. So please make sure that the eldership gets enough information about safeguarding. So that's updates from your church safeguarding coordinator, making sure you've seen the newsletter. So ask them for a report, and that's spelled wrong, AKS, that should be ask. Ask them to write a report so that safeguarding is discussed, and making sure that people are aware of incidents. Elizabeth, I can see your hands raised. I'll respond to you in 2 secs. Potentially appoint an elder with safeguarding responsibility. It may be that your church safeguarding coordinator is an elder. If they're not, then also have an elder who's got that responsibility to link in with them. Make sure that you've got relevant posters in your church with safeguarding information. Make sure that people have signed that safeguarding statement, and get feedback from your staff and volunteers. talk to them. Are the safeguarding policies working? Do they know what to do? Check in with people again. It's around that strategic oversight. Are the people who work with your staff or with your children, your adults at risk, are they confident with safeguarding? So speak to them, get that feedback. Look at the URC website, make sure you're up to date with Good Practice 6 now that it's been revised. If you didn't come to our safeguarding symposium, the recording of that will be on the URC website next week. I've sent that off today. The link to that again will be in the newsletter. But if you just want to check next week, the entire safeguarding symposium will be available for anyone to watch. So you can have a look at that. Make sure safeguarding is discussed regularly, and obviously have an understanding of what needs to be reported. If there are incidents, learn lessons from them, and let's make positive changes. Right, I'm going to stop my share, and Elizabeth, would you like to share with us?
Yes, I just wanted to mention that in our group, we were from different churches, and most of whom had regular reports on safeguarding and so on, and none of us had ever seen a safeguarding newsletter.
Right. That's
now,
what
I don't know if that is. I don't know if that's shared elsewhere or whether we were just 5 unlucky churches, but.
I don't think you're 5 unlucky churches at all. It's one of the reasons why I raised it in safeguarding training, because it was only reintroduced this year, and I think that it's not widely circulated. So that's why I do raise it. So please speak. Your church safeguarding coordinator will have had that email to them. It's possible that they've not looked at it, they've not read it, and that they've not passed it on. If you chat to your church safeguarding coordinator and they haven't had it, then please ask them to speak to their synod safeguarding officer, or take that back to me, let me know. Yeah, please communicate that, and then we can make sure you get it. It, like I said, it does always get uploaded onto the URC website. It's circulated differently in different synods. So the joys of the URC, some people will get that circulated from Emma at Church House. Some people will get it from their synod safeguarding officer. It varies synod to synod. So like I said, if you don't have it, speak to your church safeguarding coordinator, check whether they've got it. And if they haven't got it, ask them to speak to their SSO and try and get it sent on to you. But it's not just you, I assure you, it's not just you at all.
Yeah.
Anyone else? And I will, right, I'm just going to answer the questions in the chat. So somebody said, is it the same as in school? Have we an obligation to report a disclosure? Yes, you have. You do have an obligation, and that safeguarding is everyone's responsibility. We all have an obligation, whether you're a trustee, a safeguarding professional, or Joe Blogs in the street. We all have an obligation to keep people safe. So, but you do have a legal duty of care as a trustee to make sure that disclosures are responded to. So that's about making sure, obviously, that it gets to the right people. If it's the police, if it's the local authority, if children's social care, adult social care, speak to your church safeguarding coordinator, speak to your your synod safeguarding officer. They will advise you on who that needs to go to, and if a referral needs to be made. I've had instances where people have said, oh, I'll let you know, but I don't think we need to make a referral. And actually we have needed to. So it's always best to speak to the SSO and get that advice. It's soundboarding. We do it too. As SSOs, I will speak to colleagues and say, we've had this incident, we've had this, do you think I need to make this referral? Because nobody has all the answers. And the worst thing you can do with safeguarding when it's so serious is work in isolation. If you work together, you're more likely to get the right answer. Again, you can do that without disclosing confidential information. You can keep people's names secret, but you can still get advice. And yeah, the more advice you get, the more likely we are to make the right decision. I think that was the only thing that I hadn't. Oh no, there's 4. There's another 4. There's more. One-off party lets. So if you've got your building's being hired out as a one-off, obviously we don't expect them to necessarily have a safeguarding coordinator. It's for a party. Again, it's a case of, like you said, them seeing your safeguarding policy. They don't necessarily need to have done a risk assessment. Again, for a part, it depends on your yeah, I'm trying to think whether they definitely need risk assessments. Isn't safeguarding, it's health and safety. I might double check that, but they would definitely need to have seen your safeguarding policy with your hiring form, definitely, because the key thing is that they know who to report to if there's a concern. So if anything happens in that party, they know who to follow that up with. So the key thing is the safeguarding policy. And I think the other was an answer to an earlier question. Does anyone have any further questions? Nope. Well, if that's the case, if you do have anything after the training, you're more than welcome to email me or email Emma and she will pass it to me. I'll just put my email in the chat now in case you don't have it. Some of you will. It's carrie.calendar@urc.org.uk. Like I said, you'll get your feedback form and your slides after today's training. Thank you very much. And I've blown myself away because I've finished bang on 4 o'clock. So yeah, thank you for your time and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much, Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.